Welcome back. It's Tom Christie back in the studio, and this will be session 2 of creating a green heron palm frond carving. And in session 1, we kind of did the conceptual work. We got the composition put together. In this session, we'll focus on carving the components. So getting the feet carved, getting the body carved, the base ready to go, the support structure finished. And then we'll have session 3 where we kind of put it all together and you can see the finished carving. So let's get going in session 2. All right, now making the feet, I've got a piece of holly, which is very hard wood. I've got the feet bent in the position that I want to carve them in. So I'm going to freehand a top pattern. Leaving plenty of wood. And I've got this toe curled back here, so I need to leave enough wood back there. Make sure I have the right length. And then this toe. Then I need to create a side pattern as well, so I'll do that and then we'll bandsaw those out. All right, I've got a side pattern and a top pattern, so carefully bandsaw those out. The holly is really hard and I've left additional material so I've got something to hang on to and keep my hands away from the blade as we're carefully bandsawing this. I am going to speed this video up, but I want you to see actual speed here first, because again, this holly is really hard and you need to go slow on your bandsaw. There's a lot of curves we're going to be cutting here too. So you need to go back and forth to give yourself clearance every once in a while. Just keeping my hands away from the blade totally. We'll cut this side profile first, but I'll also leave a little bit of material attached so the whole thing doesn't come apart while I then cut the top. All right, speeding the video up 2 times now, just so you're aware of that. Carefully backing out. You can easily pull the blade off the wheels if you're not careful here, so just be careful. Now I'm going in for that second side profile cut along the bottom. And you can see when I get to the back end there where the nail is, I'm going to leave a little bit of wood. I don't want to completely detach this cutout from the rest of the block. You can see I'm working the blade to get around the corner there. It's a pretty sharp curve. The blade's moving around a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to the top profile. And again, the pieces are still attached at that rear toe area. And that keeps everything nice and in alignment as you go ahead and cut out the top profile. I'll skip through this so you don't have to watch the entire thing. Okay, further along, and I'm finishing up at that rear toe. And now I want to cut that toe so that everything releases. Now I can pull apart the pieces, and that's the piece I want. Well, there's the cutout for that foot. And I have to drill a hole carefully in there for clearance for this. And then we'll use a little epoxy sculpt to blend those together. And I'll probably fasten this before I do a lot of carving on. This is pretty fragile even though it's holly. All right, I've got that ready to go, and now I'll do the same thing with this foot. Got the holly feet. Right now it looks like he has boots on, but this will all be blended out, and these will be coated so that we can do some carving on the legs. And pretty happy with the way it's looking. I like the composition, and I think it's going to be really cool when I'm done. Now I'm going to do some rounding of the feet, and I did decide that I could freehand these. I'm using a little ruby pyramid shaped bit and just rounding off the edges, and I've got this at 2 times speed, just for your information. So I'm just going to spend time rounding things off and being careful, not pressing too hard, but these are still pretty strong. The holly is amazingly strong. So I decided I was able to do this freehand. Doing a little rounding on the bottom, although these feet are going to be slapped against the tree trunks, so I don't have to worry about too much detail here. Now I want to form the nails, and I'm using a little flame-shaped ruby bit to go into both sides, make an indentation, and then remove material to define those nails. This is normal speed, by the way. And then doing some undercutting to shape those so they have a nice curved look to them. Real characteristic of this bird. It really uses those to grip onto those tree trunks. So I'll speed through the rest of this. With this little ruby bit, it's putting a pretty nice finish, and there's very little sanding that I'll have to do when I'm done with this. There we go. Just give you a closer look at these. I'm not trying to put too many wrinkles or that type of decorative detail in these, just stylistic. Now I'm just using some 5-minute epoxy and locking in the position of the feet with the legs in the position that I want the bird. I really wanted to use these palm frond stems to simulate the tree trunks sticking out of the water or the branches, and now I'm just using the cylindrical burr and going to cut some detail into the top of these to make them look a little worn and weathered, so they're just not a hard clean cut line on top. And I'm going to use various tools to dig in and put holes in the top of these. So I'm going to speed through this, but just going to put a little wear and tear on the top of these palm frond stems. Again, I'm not trying to go with full-blown decorative carving here, just kind of stylistically representing the tree trunk because of the nature of these palm frond carvings. Here's a quick look after the carving's been done. I rounded the top so they look a little worn. Used a ruby bit to dig down in and create some texture. Now I've taken the tree trunks back off, and I'm just using my belt sander to put a smooth surface on this piece of walnut, which is actually very light for walnut, but I kind of like the way the color goes with the palm frond branches I'm using for the tree trunk structure in the water. So I'm trying to represent some branches sticking out of the water, and this bird is just perched ready to take a fish or a frog that happens to float by. Once I have the top smooth, I'm going to turn that over and do a little bit of work on the bottom just to flatten it out a bit and not try to remove all of the sawmill marks under there. Now I'm going to use epoxy sculpt. It's 2-part epoxy putty. And you knead the two parts together until it's a consistent color. And then I've got some water here. And I want to use the epoxy sculpt to cover this area and blend into the feet. Kind of rolling it into a log and then spreading it out so I can surround the support structure here. Once I have it surrounded, then I can use my finger and start shaping and blending into the foot. This has a pretty long cure time, so you've got some time to work here, but still need to work relatively quickly. Never done this before, so we're all going to find out together how it works. I've used epoxy sculpt, but not in this way. Get rid of the seam between the areas of epoxy sculpt. So I'm going to work this just to save time. I'll just come back when I'm going to do the same thing and fill it up to here. I've marked a line. This is where it inserts into the body, so I want to take the leg diameter right up to that, and that'll create a stop when we insert this into the body. So quick look at the leg. And now I'll do the other one, and then we'll set those aside to dry. We're going to do the carving of the epoxy sculpt after the fact, or I may just end up painting these. Sometimes I treat a palm frond more like a smoothie because it's stylized anyway, so a lot of carving detail doesn't seem to fit. I set those legs aside. Now I want to work on the body, and I'm using the Fordham with this bullet nose 3/4 inch bit, and I'm just going to do some rounding. And I've never carved a head in using the stem of the palm frond, so I'm anxious to see how this material carves. I think I'm going to have to be careful. It's pretty hard, and it seems to be carving well, but it remains to be seen how much detail I'll be able to hold up there on the head. So I'm going to be cautious, particularly with the bill area. And I'll kind of speed through this. Again, I'm not going to have much detailed sculpting on a palm frond carving. You want to keep the integrity of the palm so that you can still recognize it as a palm frond even when the carving is done. I'm going to take off all this loose material on the edge so that I have a firmer surface there, and we'll seal that up later. This palm frond material is very punky and porous, particularly as you get towards the back where it's actually the stem that attaches to the tree trunk, that thick section, and the palm itself is out in the stem section, the palm branch itself and leaves. I'm switching to this teardrop shaped burr, and I'm going to remove material back here around the tail. This is very soft material, so it doesn't take much to dig in quickly. So just going to proceed cautiously here. It's a very dusty process, as you can see, so good dust collection really helps. I'll speed up the video here. I'm just putting some separation between the tail, which is that lower section, and the upper section, which would be the primaries and tertials up there. And by doing that, I keep the bottom and the top of the frond shell intact, and just continue that characteristic shape of the frond and not lose that. All right, now I've kind of laid out the head according to the pattern and the bill location, and I'm using this little cylindrical ruby bit, to go in and begin to define the various areas of the bill. I'm not going to go through this in a great amount of detail. The process is very similar to the other bill carving detail videos that I've put together. This is just a totally different shape, but the process is kind of similar. So I'll speed through this just so you can look at it being formed. But this is where you really have to study your reference materials. This is a species I'm not familiar with. I haven't carved before, so it really makes you study the bird and get a lot of different views to try to make what you're carving accurate. And I like that about palm frond carvings in particular, because normally it gets me out of my comfort zone, and I really enjoy the creative process and learning a new bird like this. This palm frond stem material is kind of fibrous. It's solid, but it also has fibers running through it. So that presents a little bit of a challenge. It's not as easy to carve as Tupelo because the material's not as consistent as Tupelo. But I'm pretty happy with the way this is shaping up, and I think it's going to work out. Okay, I've kind of got the bill shaped up, and now I'm going to switch to this bullet shaped ruby bit and cut in the eye channels, begin to form the location of the eyes. And I used my pattern to locate the eyes, so as I'm carving, I know where they're going to be. I'm just rounding things in general and putting those eye channels in, and also forming a little bit of the crest that lays along the back in this position. It's a little further on in the carving, and I'm just using that same bit to kind of sand things and smooth things out as I go. So that's looking pretty good. We'll do some sanding. Got the bill rough shaped and the eyes located per my pattern. So now I'm going to use the gouge to carefully go into this head material. Same as on a decoy. The materials are a little different here, so need to approach it cautiously so we don't gouge a piece of this palm stem out. Now I'm going to use plastic wood to set the eyes, and you've seen that in other videos, so I won't show that process here, but plastic wood and acetone. I used the pattern and marked in some nostrils, and I'm not going to put a lot of structure around this, just use this little teardrop flame-shaped ruby cutter and open up the nostril holes on both sides. For my reference, it looks like the nostrils are narrow at each end, so I'm using the tip of the flame ruby bit to form that very narrow section, and then it widens out in the middle. Last thing I'm going to do today is take some super glue and just let that soak into the bill. Since this is part of the palm frond stem, it's strong, but I want to add some strength and just let this super glue soak into the wood, especially right on the tip. And that'll soak in and strengthen that palm frond stem material. There are a few cracks in the shell, minor cracking in the shell, so I'm just using some JB Weld wood finish, repair putty. And there's also a couple of punky areas here that need to be filled. And you run into that periodically, depending on the frond and the condition of the frond. I'm going to fill those so that I can sand that off and won't have to worry about those. After checking reference, I did a little bit more carving up here. There's a fleshy area of the bill where it attaches to the face right in front of the eye. And this brow kind of comes right from the front to the eye and beyond. So I added that on both sides with a little bit of carving. And then I took some more wood out back here to make the tail more defined, and also separated the sides up here. We're going to see a little bit of the primaries and then a lot of big tertials back here. So now I want to seal the palm frond, and I do that with a mixture of acetone and 5-minute epoxy that I'll mix up and paint on, and it just helps seal over the real porous areas, especially back here, and seal that up so we can paint over it. So this is that mixture of acetone with, I mix the 5-minute epoxy up first and then mix in acetone to thin it, and then I'm going to paint that on areas of the decoy that really need a good sealing. I'm going to leave the face the way it is, and we can fill that with Deft. And then we'll let that epoxy cure overnight so it's nice and dry.